Imagine the year is 1587. You are crossing the vast Atlantic Ocean in a wooden ship, leaving behind the only world you have ever known, England. The journey is long, the waves are violent, and the uncertainty is terrifying. Yet, you carry with you the dream of a new beginning, of building a life in a mysterious land across the sea. This was the dream of over 100 men, women, and children who would become known as the settlers of the Roanoke colony. But what happened to them is one of the darkest, most haunting mysteries in all of history. When the settlers finally arrived, they found themselves on the shores of Roanoke Island, located in present-day North Carolina. The land was beautiful but unforgiving. Towering trees, swamps, and dense forests surrounded them. And beyond those woods were Native American tribes who had lived on this land for centuries. The English newcomers tried to set up their small community, building houses, a fort, and planting what little crops they could. At first, there was hope. For these families, this was the start of something new, a chance to create a permanent English presence in the new world. But very quickly, the dream began to fade. Supplies ran low, hunting was dangerous, and the soil was not easy to farm. Worse still, the settlers' relationship with some native tribes grew tense and hostile. Disease began to spread, and the colony soon faced the terrifying possibility of collapse. Governor John White, the man responsible for these settlers, knew there was only one option. He had to return to England to gather food, tools, and more settlers. It was not an easy choice. He would be leaving behind not only his people but also his own family, including his granddaughter, Virginia Dare, the first English child born on American soil. Still, he promised them he would return quickly. But fate was cruel. When John White returned to England, he was caught in the storm of war between England and Spain. The seas were filled with enemy ships. Every English vessel was needed for battle, not for rescue. For 3 long years, John White was trapped in his homeland, powerless, knowing that back in Roanoke, his people might be starving, desperate, or worse. Finally, in 1590, he secured a passage back across the ocean. Imagine his emotions as he stepped onto Roanoke Island once again. He must have expected to hear laughter, to see smoke rising from chimneys, to feel the relief of a colony that had survived against all odds. Instead, what he saw was a nightmare. The settlement was silent. The houses stood abandoned. The fort was dismantled. The tools and weapons were gone. The entire colony, 115 men, women, and children, had vanished. Not a single body was found. Not a trace of violence, no signs of a fight, no evidence of a mass escape. It was as if they had simply melted into the forest. The only evidence left behind was a single word. Carved into a wooden post in rough letters was the word Croatoan. On a nearby tree, just 3 letters, C-R-O. These cryptic carvings were the only trace of the colonists' fate. John White immediately thought of the Croatoan tribe, a native group who lived on nearby Hatteras Island. Perhaps his people had moved there, seeking shelter or forming an alliance. But violent storms and rough seas prevented White from searching the island. With supplies low and his men desperate to leave, he was forced to sail back to England, never knowing what happened to his colony. And so, the mystery began. For centuries, historians, explorers, and archaeologists have tried to answer the question. What happened to the lost colony of Roanoke? Were they killed by hostile tribes? Did they try to sail back to England on their own and perish at sea? Did they starve in the wilderness, their remains swallowed by time and nature? Or did they integrate into native communities, disappearing into their culture and leaving no trace behind? What makes the mystery more chilling is that there is no definitive proof. Later settlers in Virginia reported seeing native tribes with English features, grey eyes, lighter hair, suggesting that perhaps some of the colonists survived by joining them. Others believe something far darker happened, something no one wanted to record. The word Croatoan itself has become a haunting symbol, not just of the colony's fate, but of the eerie silence that surrounds it. To this day, no bodies, no graves, and no clear explanation have ever been discovered. Roanoke remains a ghost story, written into the pages of American history, and this is only the beginning of the mystery. Because while the facts we know paint a strange and haunting picture, the theories that attempt to explain what happened are even more chilling. As we stand before the empty remains of Roanoke, staring at that strange word, Croatoan, the mind cannot help but wonder. What could have happened to more than 100 men, women, and children who simply vanished? The silence left behind is so deep, so unsettling, that it has fueled centuries of speculation. And the truth, if ever discovered, may be even more disturbing than the mystery itself. One of the most widely accepted theories is that the colonists simply merged with the native tribes. The Croatoan people, for example, were known to have a more peaceful relationship with the English than some other tribes in the area. Perhaps the settlers sought refuge with them, choosing survival over isolation. Later generations of colonists even reported seeing native people with English features. Blonde hair, grey eyes, skin paler than others. Could these have been the descendants of Roanoke's survivors? It's possible. Yet if true, why did no written word or oral history confirm it? Why was there never a single direct account from the colonists themselves? Another theory takes a darker turn. Some believe the colony fell victim to hostile tribes who saw the English settlers as invaders. This is not impossible. Tensions and violent clashes between Europeans and native groups were common. A sudden attack might explain the disappearance, but if that were the case, where were the bodies? Where were the burned remains of houses, the scattered weapons, the unmistakable signs of a battle? Strangely, there were none. The settlement looked as if it had been taken apart calmly, as though those who lived there left willingly, or under some eerie force that required no violence at all. Others argue that the colonists may have tried to return to England on their own. With John White gone for years, starvation and hopelessness may have pushed them to build makeshift boats and set out into the ocean. But the Atlantic is merciless. Without proper ships, such a journey would almost certainly end in disaster. If they truly attempted this, their bodies would have been claimed by the sea, leaving behind no trace but the haunting emptiness of the abandoned colony. But the most unsettling theories go beyond reason. Some whisper that Roanoke fell victim not to starvation, not to war, but to something unexplainable. Stories emerged over time of supernatural forces in the New World, spirits that guarded the land, creatures said to live in the forests, curses placed upon those who tried to claim what was not theirs. Native legends spoke of dark forces, skinwalkers, and vengeful spirits that punished outsiders. Could the settlers of Roanoke have encountered something beyond human understanding? Was Croatoan not just a clue, but a warning? The word itself carries a strange weight. In later history, the word Croatoan appeared connected to other bizarre disappearances. The famous writer Edgar Allan Poe, before his mysterious death, was said to have whispered the word Croatoan. The American stage magician Harry Houdini reportedly had the word written in his diary shortly before his own unexplained passing. Even in shipwrecks and other vanishings, the word has appeared, almost like a curse echoing through time. Could it be coincidence? Or does the word carry with it a shadow that began with the lost colony? Archaeologists in modern times have tried to solve the riddle with science. Excavations on Roanoke and Hatteras Island have uncovered European tools, pottery, and weapons, objects that hint at contact between the colonists and native tribes. But even with these discoveries, the full picture remains incomplete. Were these items traded? Were they left behind by a surviving group? Or do they point to something far more tragic? that the settlers scattered in desperation, some surviving, some perishing, all fading into history without a voice. Yet, perhaps the most haunting theory is not about violence or spirits or the sea. Perhaps it is about silence. What if the colonists simply chose to leave? What if they abandoned the structures, dismantled their fort, and walked into the wilderness to start a new life, leaving no records, no traces, no memories except a single word carved into wood? To vanish from history by choice is a strange thought, but sometimes silence speaks louder than screams. And still the question lingers, why carve Croatoan? Was it a message, a clue, or was it a ritual, a final act meant to protect them? Historians have argued for centuries, but the word refuses to give up its secret. It hangs like a ghost over the story, haunting every attempt to explain what truly happened. What makes the Roanoke mystery so chilling is not just the disappearance itself, but its permanence. Centuries have passed, technology has advanced, archaeologists have searched every corner of the island and beyond, yet the truth remains buried. The lost colony has become more than history. It has become legend, a story that refuses to end. When we think of Roanoke, we don't just think of the settlers who vanished. We think of the fragility of human hope, the desperation of survival, and the terrifying silence that comes when an entire community disappears without leaving a trace. It is a reminder that history does not always give us answers. Sometimes it gives us questions so deep that they echo forever. And maybe, just maybe, that is the true legacy of Roanoke. Not the buildings they left behind, not the word carved into wood, but the haunting mystery that continues to capture the imagination of every generation that hears it. Because in the end, the lost colony is not just a story about the past. It is a mirror reflecting our own fears. Fear of the unknown, fear of vanishing, fear that even our greatest hopes can be swallowed whole by silence. And perhaps that is why Roanoke will never be forgotten.